Hello, my name is Dr. Kate Weiss, and I am an assistant professor of environmental science and policy at Marist University. My dissertation work focused on understanding how wild carnivores make decisions about what they eat in urban environments. My work now focuses on understanding how to promote more sustainable futures for people and wildlife species by incorporating social, ecological, and evolutionary approaches. So I think, my biggest success professionally in some ways is just the fact that I managed to get a tenure track assistant professor position straight out of my PhD, which is bananas. So many people don't have really struggle, right, to be able to find a job after their PhD. And so the fact that I was able to find one right out the gate is, I think, a pretty big accomplishment, something I'm really proud of. But at the same time, right, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was just such a good fit. It was like kind of right place, right time. Like it actually was the only interview of any kind that I got in that cycle, the only Zoom interview, the only in-person interview. So it wasn't like I was getting a bunch of stuff and, knocking them down. And like, it's not like I was like a superstar getting every opportunity in the biz. No, I applied for a bunch of jobs and didn't hear anything from most of them. But one I did hear from, and it happened to work and just be a really good fit. So I'm really grateful for that, but also really proud of it that I was able to navigate that space and get that job. I'm also proud of the fact that I just finished my first year as an assistant professor. Finished finals this past week, finished grading yesterday. So really proud of that. And then I'm also just really proud of the fact that I've been able to make such good networks and collaborations with people that have led to some really cool projects. Those collaborations and friendships have turned not only into stimulating intellectual conversations and publications, but also just like good hangs, And I think that's also something to be proud of, and that's really important. What wasn't a challenge that I experienced in graduate school? No, graduate school had a lot of really wonderful experiences and things, but also, of course, a lot of challenges. For me, honestly, I think one of the biggest challenges that I faced was just how long it took. And I think this is something a lot of people experience, right? But it took me 7 years to finish my PhD. And I know that the average, I think in ecology as an ecologist is like 6.5 years. And there was COVID and like all these sorts of things that happened. But even though I knew intellectually, right, that all of these things were true and that it's reasonable and fine. And my advisor was like, I finished in like 6.5 years. And I talked to other people and like, I finished in 7, 8, 9, right? Like that it took me this long. For me personally, it felt like this huge weight and like this huge sense of failure that I couldn't finish, right? That I couldn't get to the next stage or the next step. And it's also really interesting because I actually published a lot during this time. Like, it's not like I was, struggling to be productive. And so I published a lot, but not my dissertation, right? And that was another thing that kind of was really heavy on me, is that I was like, oh, great, I can do all these things except the thing that I have to do to like be done. And so I really struggled with this kind of feeling of inadequacy, right? That I wasn't done yet. Again, even though plenty of people finish in this time. And there's so many reasons why it took me this long, right? I switched PhD advisors, COVID happened, and I had to switch my whole proposal because I was going to do work in California and I was based at Arizona State University, right? And so I couldn't travel, right? So there were all of these things that happened. And also my work was really involved, as is, all PhD work, right? But you're doing it all pretty much yourself and figuring it out. And so, of course, it took all of this time. In retrospect, right, now that I'm out of it, I can say, of course, this is what happened. But at the time, I really felt stuck and I really struggled with comparison, right? And with being like, okay, sure, you graduated in this time, but you're actually successful. So that that's your future, like, that it was fine. But then I would compare myself to, for example, my husband, who I met in grad school, who I love very dearly, but he finished in 5 years, but really kind of 4 years. Like, they were like, if you're gonna take the full 5 years that you're allotted, you're gonna have to add on this extra project because you're already kind of done, right? And he's in a different field that's much more lab-based, while I'm more field-based. And so his already had kind of a quicker timeline in that regard. But nonetheless, it was like self-imposed. He was very supportive, but like self-imposed this sense of like comparison or friends or other sorts of things, or even just this idea of who I should be and what I should be able to do and accomplish. And so of course, that's imposter syndrome, right? Which I think is a really classic thing that people in grad school and throughout various other aspects of life kind of experience and feel this, kind of feeling of why can other people do this, but I can't, and why I'm taking so long because I'm actually an imposter. I'm not supposed to be here, and things like that. And I think this actually got worse the further along I got in my PhD journey, because you start off and you're like, well, I'm new, so I'm supposed to not know anything. And you have this kind of freedom, and then you progress and actually start to learn and feel like you're coming into your power a bit. And that, I think, for me was quite scary and unnerving, because it also involved then this element of fear of success and fear of like, okay, well, now I am becoming an expert. And what if I'm wrong, right? What if I'm somehow lying, even though I'm not, right? Like I'm not, right? But like in my head, I'm like, who am I to know things? And so this kind of immense imposter syndrome, this immense fear of not failure really, but really success, right? What if I do well and then I'm really tricking everyone? I'm really lying to everyone about all of this. And so, and if I do all of that, right, I've tricked them somehow, and then I'm a bad person. And then I like have really done something bad. And so what do you do about that? You go to therapy. And so I ended up going to therapy, which was very, very helpful. I highly recommend. And so, yeah, so that kind of helped a lot in that regard, as well as like my community, right? Friends, my spouse, my PhD advisor was very, very supportive. And I think all of these things in some ways are stuff that you just kind of have to work through and get through until you can kind of like, I guess, sort of build your confidence, which I guess also leads into the next question a bit. Several great coping strategies, right? So therapy, right? Very great. We love therapy. And so big fan, very helpful. And I actually intentionally sought a therapist who had a PhD, because I was like, I need someone who knows what this feeling is, right? I'm sure other folks are very capable also, right, at providing support to these sorts of things. But for me personally, I felt like working with someone who had and could know what this experience was like and how real it is. Because when you're a graduate student, it becomes your identity, right? It becomes, in a sense, who you are. And so having someone who really understood that, I think, was really helpful for me. I also think, right, leaning on your friends who have been through all these sorts of things is really helpful too. Again, my spouse, who I met through graduate school and so had also been through all this, was really helpful. My family, right? I think all these were really good. I also think just some advice that I got was really helpful, right? Like, so for example, my husband's PhD advisor has this saying about research where she says, the most important part of research is the right? The redoing. And so even just finding moments to be like, of course, I don't know everything, because that is the definition of what we're doing here, right? As researchers, as scientists, we are trying to understand things that we do not have the answers to. So of course, this is hard. Of course, I don't know what I'm doing, because not only am I learning how to do it and just trying to get to a point where then I can enter the workforce as an expert, but who's still going to be learning, right, throughout the course of my life. But in addition, we're doing something that people have not done before. That's the point of why we're here. So of course I don't know what's happening. Of course I don't know the details, right? And so then it really became a realization and an understanding that my challenge was less about fear of success or failure or imposter syndrome, but more this kind of crisis of confidence, right? Of trusting in myself to know that I'm not a liar, that I'm not here to trick anyone, that I am doing my best, that I'm imperfect, right? I'm not going to get it right all the time. I'm a human person, right? But that I am moving through life earnestly and authentically as best as I can, right? And so trusting in those sorts of things, I think, has become helpful. I think I learned that there is no failure is good in some ways, right? We learn from these things. It's not the end of the world, right? I didn't defend, like it took me 7 years. And now I'm like, of course it did. I wasn't ready, right? I wasn't ready to be done before that time, which I think is partly why it took me so long, was that I wasn't actually ready yet. And I was judging myself compared to other people who are on different personal and professional timelines, right? And so I think that's something important. I think also, right, to reiterate something that I said before, is that of course I felt like I didn't know anything, right? Of course I was like confused and concerned about my lack of knowledge or experience, because I was in a graduate program. Like, I wouldn't be there if I already knew how to do everything, right? And I'm doing work that no one's done before. That's the point of science, right? And also the point of science is that it's falsifiable. So of course I was wrong sometimes. Like, that's the point. That's the whole reason we're there. And two, you know, I think something else that I've learned from this experience is that grad school is so isolating and insular. And when you get to the other side of it, you truly realize, wow, I lacked so much perspective that you can't have had, in a sense, without going through it. But I think it's given me the sense of like, things are rarely as serious as you think they are. And like, the world isn't going to end, and it would have been totally fine. And my value did not hinge on whether or not I successfully completed this thing. You do deserve to be here. The only thing that it takes to deserve to be there and to get a PhD is being there, right? That's it. Because it's just a long slog of work, right? It's just a collection of skills and knowledge and things. And we can all do that. Anyone can do that, right? So it's not about how smart you are. It's not about how clever you are. It's not even about how productive you are, right? It's about your willingness to be open and curious and interested and honest, right? That is it. That's what getting a PhD is. And if you're doing all those things, congrats, you did it. And if those things aren't fulfilling you, then also not being in grad school is fine. Like, it's not a value-laden thing, right? To get a PhD, to not get a PhD. It doesn't mean you're a good or bad person. It doesn't mean anything other than that you have a set of skills and knowledge that then allow you to do other sorts of things, right, in life, and to see the world in a particular kind of way. I'd also say, again, the most important part of research is the right? The redoing things is not a failure. That is the learning. And also, learning is inherently uncomfortable and frustrating. That is growth, right? Those are growing pains, essentially, right? And that is science. I would also say, don't be afraid of success as best as you can. Don't be afraid of your own power, right? And your own abilities, and to try to learn, maybe through therapy, how to trust yourself, right? And something I'm still working on, right? And I think it's a lifelong thing that we go through. And then finally, I would say, get as many dogs as possible. I have 3 dogs, and that's a lot of dogs, but maybe too many dogs. But nonetheless, I say have a pet. That's my feeling. Get a pet. Pets are great. They give you a lot of love, and they also can if you have a dog, they get you out of the house and walking and active. And that's a good thing for anxiety. So those are my thoughts and feelings. So long, farewell. No, I'm kidding. Thanks so much for watching Failsafe Science. My name is Kate. And I hope my story helps graduate students feel less alone. Remember, you have value, you deserve to be here, and go pet a dog. Thanks.